I'm speaking to you from Chicago. Can people hear me okay? Yeah, good. So welcome to the Go Public panel of the Wicked Arts Assignment Symposium. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Olivia Goody. I'm the Angela Gregory Patarakis Professor of Art Education at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And on our panel today, we have Eva Berg, Ann Thulson, and Ronald Nahoff. I'll give you a little bit more information about them as they begin presenting. This is really scary doing this on Zoom, I have to say. I'm used to speaking at symposia, but this is different. Anyway, I see everyone is already muted, so there's no need to tell people to mute, but if you're not, you might want to check and see. Yeah, so the theme of this panel is Go Public. In the diverse array of Wicked Art assignments, perhaps one constant is the refusal to make arts assignments into sheltered, limited, isolated tasks. Instead, these concisely worded assignments task participant learners with engaging the world in its complexity and eccentricity in unexpected ways. So on this panel, each of the artist educators chose public space as the site of their project provocations, recognizing that arts learners do not need to be protected from the world and that the world does not need to be protected from the possibilities suggested by the interventions of artists. So I'd like to begin by introducing Eva, and I've lost the part where I have her bio. Yes, here it is. Eva. Eva holds 2 MFAs and studied at Malmö Art Academy, Lund University, and at HDK Valland at the University of Gothenburg. She is an artist and lecturer in visual arts at the Malmö University. Eva is interested in how contemporary art practice can be woven into educational context. So without further ado, Eva.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will start to share my screen, I think. Let's see where I have it here. So, well, first of all, do you hear me now? You hear me good? Okay. It's really strange to just sit in front of a screen. I'm very pleased and I thank you all for coming here and listen to this. And it's nice to gather together actually all over the world in the same screen. So my name is Eva Berg. I will go on here. And I will also do like this. I'm not seeing so much. I'm an artist, and my practice is in painting and screen printing. And I'm working at the Faculty of Education and Society in the program for visual art teacher in Malmö University. So my practice in painting and screen printing, and I always wanted to bridge visual art teacher students with the contemporary art world and scene. With that said, visual art in the Swedish curriculum contains image making, communication and image analysis, and the art is just one part of the curriculum. So my intention is to introduce my students to the art world, so there shouldn't be such a big gap between school and the art world. And I also want them to experience art methods. So I have made some art activists myself, and I wanted to challenge my students to be part of this. And let's see, I have to do like this. So the assignment was 100-meter Malmö. You will investigate a specific location, stretch of about 100 meters in Malmö. Could be wherever you wanted or interested in. You should conduct a guerrilla marketing or art activism in 100 meters that you have selected. You choose something you want to market. It can be completely abstract things, ideas, or content from the course's cultural studies. In your message, you combine text and image into a print. And what you do can be combined with any object that is placed on the selected stretch. So the method was art activism or urban inventions in public spaces. And my theoretical framework is Atkinson's disobedient pedagogy, as in his book, Art of Disobedience and Ethics. If you dare to be disobedient, you can open up new pathways and potentials in learning processes. And in The Beautiful Risk of Education, Biesta argues for a weak education, an education that moves away from an education that is strong, secure, predictable, and risk-free, where everything is aligned and predefined. Instead, education should be slow, difficult, frustrating, and weak. He means that by forcing students to take risks, we allow them to be creative in their learning and doing. And that is the only way for students to emerge as human subjective subjects. And then we have Goffman, of course, to go out on the front stage. As a teacher and as an artist, you go out on the front stage in the school, in the classroom, or in front of your audience. But it's something else to go out in public spaces and go out in the front stage, actually. And Roland May, who talked about the courage to create, he says, creative people are distinguished by the fact that they can live with anxiety, even though a high price may be paid in terms of insecurity, sensitivity, and defenselessness. It takes courage to take place in the public space. So now I'm going to present some examples. And the first example is from my student. She says, she has her project, I own myself. She tried, I own my body. I own no one, but she decided I own myself. She chooses body activism and talks about physical capital, bodies with a certain size, but also about health and sports Nazis. How extreme it has become with a view of what is really healthy today. This is something that a rounder person often encounters, subjects about this. And she went out and made these posters that she gave away, but she didn't want to be seen when she was installing. So I think she went out very early in the morning, actually. And the next student made this art activist by pasting drawings on the street outside the teacher education, the university, on that stretch, actually, outside the university. And she says everybody who is going to become a teacher in the future need to know and educate about transgender people. Only now in the later half of the century, people have begun to understand that transgender exists and that they're not psychopaths or serial killers like in the Silence of the Lambs, for example. There's a great deal there will be a trans person in every classroom. And the whole installation looked like a crime on a trans person, actually. And this student went out very early also, like 3 o'clock in the morning, I think, when her went out. Okay, finally, I have this last student who often bicycled in Malmö. It's a bike city, actually, and thought that people sometimes zoomed out and biked on muscle memory. He wanted to interfere with that and test the biker's observation ability. So he made a pedestrian crossing for snails. And I will see if this will work like this. I think it's okay. Do you see this now? Yeah. You don't see it, do you?
You have to share the new.
Yeah, I have to share. That's what I thought also. So I will do that. Okay. Okay. will stop sharing here right now, and I will just do like this, so it's not going back. Okay. Okay, so this was the last example. I'm sorry. And well, most students have problems expressing the art in public. Some got up very early, as I said before. And this student wanted to start her piece after dusk because she was anxious to go out before. At 10 o'clock in the evening, she went out wearing cap and hoodie under the jacket to do this. And this is something what they have said, actually, my student. The scariest thing, this part of the process is about courage. Questions that you asked before. What will people believe? What will they think? Will they think it's childish and ugly? What do I do if the police come? I didn't want any unwanted attention, but if anyone asks what I'm doing, I knew that I'd answer I'm doing a study. To take place in public space is difficult, and therefore I myself was the largest obstacle. The toughest step was the first step I took, going public. I wonder if I break norms. Does that mean that I break the law? What is legal? Shall I speak to the police before acting in public? Activism meant that I had to leave the known towards the unknown and had to stumble as when I learned how to ride a bicycle. When I actually did it, I had to make a balance act, which made me grow and gave me self-confidence. So what happened during this? Actually, they got better self-confidence. Some said it was the hardest task of the entire teacher training program that I had. They challenged their self-perception, and they challenged the perception of right and wrong. And finally, what does all this mean? The hardship and continuous reflection increased their learning. They learned something. They dared to take place and become publicly visible. They became public, democratic citizens. And one reason this is challenging for the students could be that they are not usually challenged in this type of projects where they need to challenge themselves, be personal, and touch difficult questions or subjects in the society. But it's absolutely necessary for teachers to practice and to perform this type of exercises in order to use them in their future profession as art teachers with their pupils, and have the courage to do so. As Biasta and Atkins says, make a weak, open, and risky learning situation, become disobedient. So, if you're interested, we just, this e-mag just came out on INSEA in this summer, I think. It's called Traces Visual Arts Education in Sweden. And I have this article about risk-taking in education, when art activists challenge both students and visual arts teacher educators.
Thank you, Eva.
The time was out there, okay? Thank you for listening. Right.
Thank you, Eva.
Yes.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, I stop here.
Yes. So our next, one thing I wanted to remind people, we're going to do questions through the chat. So as we switch to our next presenter, you might want to take a minute now and put any questions that you have for Eva into the chat so that we can read them and ask them. We're going to do all the questions at the end for everyone, but make a note now so you don't forget the questions that you wanted to ask. Okay, so our next presenter is Ann Thulson. And Ann, if you want to go ahead and start to share your screen, that would be great. Ann Thulson actually is a dear friend. I was so happy when I saw that we were on the same panel together. She studied painting at the Cranbrook Academy of Art and teaches art education at the Metropolitan State University of Denver. She's taught art to children in Denver public schools and in her camp, the School of the Poetic City. She alternates between post-studio and studio practices. So welcome, Ann.
All right, great. Thank you, Olivia. I'd like to share one practice that I have done with children ages 5 to 11 at my art camp, School of the Poetic City. And I do a lot of research about using contemporary practices with young children. And the School of the Poetic City is one of those research sites. It's a summer camp that meets a week in the summer. We do 2 weeks, but 1 full week of, hang on. Oops, I'm having trouble seeing. Okay, there we go. Great. Sorry about that. This is what we do. We gather together, we walk, we see, we respond, we collect, and we reflect. And by gathering, I mean, we start at the beginning together, and we talk about a contemporary artist and link it to something in their lives. So if we're talking about text, using text in the city to interrupt things, we read the section in Charlotte's Web where the spider, Charlotte, weaves a text that disrupts the farm. So we're, you know, constantly trying to connect contemporary practices to children's lives. And then we walk, and we walk a lot. They have little maps that they refer to. And sorry, I'm having trouble with this. And we walk a 5-mile radius around the city. It's the same walk, basically, in and out of some streets and alleys. And they become good at walking. And really the walking is the curriculum. And then we see. So we walk to a very traditional art site, like an art museum or a series of galleries. But we also take them to places that are less known and places that their parents would not take them probably, to see various art and cultural and intervention areas. And this is, the other thing about walking is you get to go under things, around things, and through things in ways that you can't as a car. And we all know children are just shuttled around in cars to lessons and play dates. And, you know, they don't have a lot of time just to meander or derive. And we give them lots of time to do that. And they'll discover things that, things just pop up when you're walking, like a quinceañera, you know, and then they respond. And this is really, sometimes they just respond because obviously they're children and that's just what they do. They'll find their own ways of responding. But we also give them a practice, an intervention, kind of a guerrilla practice at the beginning when we gather, and they can respond in that way. So we have lots of different methods of responding to the city. And we talk about the city as if it's a personified thing. So we talk about having a conversation with the city, healing the city, talking to the city, decorating the city, you know, creating a conversation with the city. And so they do. So when we go places, they respond. And these are all kind of practices that we have worked at with them. And then we collect. They have journals, and God knows what they put in those bags. They collect many things that I have no idea what they collect, but they also collect just things on their own. And we give them practices to collect things from the city. So it's a give and take. They give things to the city and they take things from the city. This sometimes galleries will give us and museums will give us things to collect. This is a pigeon from the Contemporary Art Museum. And then reflecting, it doesn't happen just at the end of the day. I just want to say that to reflect is necessary throughout the day. And I think the only way to make that happen is to give them time. So instead of like, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, we just slow it down and let them kind of absorb things. All right. So this is one way of responding. This is assess the city, which is the practice. And I'm getting a little echo, but so children are assessed constantly, at least in the States. They are tested and tested and tested, and they're used to that. But the question we ask them is, what if you assess the grown-ups? So they are going to assess the city, which they've already kind of personified in the way the grown-ups have kind of designed the city for everyone. So they make blank awards. They find things to assess. They complete the assessment, and they put their assessment onto the site. So here here's an example of a blank award. We just give a lot of materials and they just make something. And then it's really important to have a tape and pencil handy. I'm just trying to move my, okay, all right. Because they'll walk and they'll pull the pencil out, the thing out, and then they'll stick it on. So here's just some assessments. Number 1, ram statue. Can you guys read the corner here? Olivia, is that the right-hand corner? Yeah? Okay. Most columns. So when you let the children choose what they're going to assess, they will come up with things that I would probably not have thought of. I wouldn't have said, I want to give this building the award because it has the most columns. But a child will, is thinking that way, especially when you think about the scale of the child to these grand ionic columns. And there he is affixing the assessment. Blooper awards goes to the stinkiest trash can, so you can assess something in a positive or a negative way. Most cool rolling hill. So this is a park where they rolled down the hill. Coolest bridge. This is a statue of a fallen soldier, and we would walk by this every morning on our way. So this little boy put on a award that says, the saddest statue, most relaxing lunch spot. So you can tell this is definitely, an 11-year-old, and this is I don't know, he was probably 5 or 6. Most stinky water fountain, prettyish thing, not bad. This person ran out of awards, but they had some Post-it notes. And place of best memories. So the first time I did this, it didn't work, because what I did was I had them make the award ahead of time and then find the thing. And all I got was vague, general, boring things like #1 city, great town, we love Denver. And it was not, I didn't think it was very good pedagogy. So I revised it, and now we start with blank awards. It's really important to have blank awards and to be able to assess as you walk. And in order to do that, you need to have a bag where you could put your hand in and grab a pencil right away. So we used to have them just have everything in their backpack. And part of the curriculum is having them be able to reach in and have access. And I just can't say how important that is. I mean, it's, having a child have access to his tools is as important as, a college student having access to research facilities. And I'd like to end with this quote by Walker Percy. What is the nature of the search, you ask? The search is what anyone would undertake if he were not sunk into the everydayness of his own life. To become aware of the search is to be onto something. Not to be onto something is to be in despair. And what I'm hoping in this practice is to help children to be onto something, and also to kind of become practiced and I would say fluent with contemporary practices that intervene with the city, that intervene with their grown-up around surroundings, so that they will continue to kind of intervene and become part of the democracy. And that is my presentation. I will stop sharing. Let me see, how do I do that? Yeah. Stop sharing. I can't hear you, Olivia.
As we switch, take a moment, think about any questions you may have for Anne, and go ahead and put them into the chat. And Ronald, why don't you get prepared and share your screen?
Yeah, I will. Thanks, Olivia.
I'll introduce, let me introduce you then too.
Yeah.
So this is Ronald Nijhoff. He studied at the HKU University of the Arts in Utrecht and teaches art at the School of Media, HKU University of the Arts in Utrecht. As an artist, Nijhoff focuses on the systems of everyday life. Using spatial constructions and photography, he operates at the intersection of two-dimensional and three-dimensional imagery. Welcome, Ronald.
Thank you. Well, that sounds pretty good, what you just told me. And I guess that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to do more of a desktop jam, maybe, than a normal presentation. So thanks for having me. I did 4 assignments, and one of them was the Go Public assignment, and so that's what I'm going to start with. I asked my students to join in with the assignments, and some of them are present, I guess. So some people joining, and maybe if they want to, if they're there, they can maybe add a comment to what they've been doing. So I'm gonna jam a little bit through it. So what you're seeing here is the place where I am now. So this is our studio. I'm sitting here in the studio. You can see my image as well, I guess. I can't come nearer, so that's a shame. So it's private, and this is all public space. It's the Jutvaasweg in Utrecht. So I will be sharing the next one, sorry. Yeah. So I think you can see my, yeah. Okay, maybe I'll show the book. That's maybe a little bit, yeah. Can you see my street view sculpture? Yeah. So one of the things I really like to do when I am having a lot of things to do and you're procrastinating, you know how things are going. You can take a walk and you can take a hike. The last speaker was talking about the nature of the search. That's what I'm really into. And the thing I really like to do is just to wander around the world, to go to spaces I've never been. And sometimes you find the most particular and more the strangest things. And maybe you know the 9 Eyes project of John Refman. If you don't, you really should. It's a nice collection of pictures he finds on the internet, on the Street View, of very strange situations. People with the I don't know. It's a long list of things you can do around there, but people who are crying, sad, having accidents and stuff. One of the things I really, which came to my mind is if you come to a place that you've never been before, can you put a sculpture there? Can you put a monument on a place where, well, a monument on a place where that relates to the place itself? So somebody talked about Dakar some time ago. They said, Ron, you really should go there. There are all these old cars. So I went there. And I thought, wow, I really should make a sculpture of that. And so I made like a bumped car monument. And the other one I did is I went to the flattest space in Holland. For those who don't live in Holland, there are not many mountains there. So I looked for a very for a billboard that has a lot of mountains in it, and it would be like some sort of a memory to the mountains. You know, the situation where you come back from holidays, where you went to the mountains, and then you suddenly see that Holland is such a flat place. I think it's very interesting to see. Well, let's go to students that have made some material of it. I don't know if Brent is joining in, but if he does, he can maybe tell something about it. Yeah, I really like this one. He went to the desert and found this picture of these guys who are very proud of their car, and he added this one to it. Did the same here. Brent is an animator, fourth-year animator.
The image.
Sorry?
I can only see part of your image.
Oh, strange.
Yeah.
Okay. I will make it a little bit smaller then. Can you see it now in full?
Yeah, it's a strange.
Is it better this
I
way?
see it. Thank you.
Yeah? Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, better.
Yeah, nice. So I'm totally not responsible for what he's doing here. This is his first impulse of adding a sculpture to public space. Next one is made last Tuesday. I had the 4 years of image and media technology, which I'm teaching. And Eileen Bruin-Kops, the same thing again, yeah. She went to Russia. She said, I've never been to Russia, to Moscow, and I'm having maybe a little bit pre-justified, I guess that's the word. So she made this addition to the city, but also this one. As you see here, you can swim there. She added this one, like a total contrast. Esther, I don't know if she's present. Oh, it's a little bit unhandy like this, but I hope it works. I didn't get any explanation, but she went to, I guess, Spitsbergen, or the most northern, coldest place where you can go. And she added this sculpture. The nice thing is that if some people, are you still seeing my desktop? I don't know, because there's no green edge around it. That some people just do a totally different version from the assignment you made. So that's what Pepijn Zuiderveld has been doing. He's a photography student. And he made this, worms in Oslo. And he made this trees in Oslo. And it's not, which is actually nice. It's more of a sculpture, and because he's a photographer, I like it a lot. So the last one from Thomas Pietersen. He went to Paris. I didn't speak to him, but maybe he hasn't been to Paris. But he added this milky kind of sculpture. I don't know if the idea is to stand under it and to let the milk pour all over you. And I really would like to see that pictures, of course. Okay. So that's the idea to do it. I'm going to show you. Yeah. I did 3 other assignments, and I really would like to show that to you as well, if it's possible. Because some people did really nice. How do you say it? Elaborations on it. I don't know how many time there's left. 3 minutes. Okay. Are you still seeing my desktop on fire? Yeah. So another one is that I propose to make a sculpture that's only made as a sculpture for burning. So you make a sculpture that's just suited for burning, that's not suited for putting in an exhibition space, but the only thing is just to get rid of it. This is from Frank. I know Frank is present, I guess. So he made this very nice sculpture from a cube inside of a cube, and he burned it. He didn't have any problems with that, and that's why I like him. He made another one like this. Sorry for the bad quality. So a very complicated one. Another guy also called Frank, but that doesn't matter. He's a graphic designer, so he has a totally different approach of it. So he made the graphical thing too, and then burned it. I like this picture a lot. This one's from Lisa Browns. She's a student of EMT. She made these nice pictures. The thing is, that I asked the students to make a fire is kind of dangerous, but I like it that they did it. Noah, photography student, made this work. The order is not right, I'm sorry. And he discovered that this material, OSB, is not really flammable.
1 minute, Ronald.
Yeah. Last one, also photography student, Samuel Veenstra. And he made this very small sculptures.
Oh, cool.
More models. And even made a picture of it and burned the picture. So that's another addition to the idea. I wish I had some more time, but I don't. I want to end up with an assignment that you have to make artwork for your pet.
Take 1 minute, Ronald.
I know. This is an artwork Naomi Voets made for her pet. And her dog is called Harry. And the idea is that, oh, sorry, I muted it. She castrated her dog and felt very sorry for it. And she made an animation for him, showed it to him, and made a short movie about it. And of course, he doesn't really care.
But I did pay coins to let them do it. Is that worse?
So to go short, I was very proud of all the students who made the assignments for this event, and I would like to thank them. And well, I can stop share now. And I hope I'm in time.
You did it. Good. Thank you so much. So the next presenter is actually the last presenter, and then we'll have time for a discussion, is me. And I already mentioned where I teach, and a number of projects that I show come out of a program that I ran for many years called the Spiral Workshop. At this point, my practice combines my work as a collaborative public artist and as an educator, creating spaces in which teachers investigate and reinvent the social practices of art education. In a sense, what empowers a teacher to do the kinds of wonderful curriculum we're seeing here today. So I'm going to be talking about teaching color. And I'm thinking of it as chromophilia, color interventions, loving color. Yeah. And so one of the things I want to start with talking about is the primal repression of art education, which is, I believe, the color wheel. Because people consistently have students painting color wheels, oftentimes using tempera paint. And when you mix the red and blue, you never get purple. You get this sort of dark maroon color. And so then the teacher is left saying, well, if we had the perfectly balanced paints, it would be violet, etc. But then, you know, one of the things I want to think about that is that Elliot Eisner's quote, learning in the arts requires the ability and a willingness to surrender to the unanticipated possibilities of the work as it unfolds. And yet, when we do color wheels with students, we ask students to deny the evidence of their own eyes, to discount the results of their own experiments. Students learn to distrust the nuanced reality they have discovered, and students learn not to value and trust the unexpected and the unanticipated. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad idea to do a color wheel. This was a color wheel thing I did many years ago with my students. But the thing of it is, the usefulness of a color wheel works in part because it helps us to visually organize the way colors are mixed. But does that mean that doing more and more color wheels is actually helpful? A lot of teachers have kind of figured out that that's not the case. So then they do things like personalized color wheels. And if you Google that, you'll get all these different things. And one asks, why is it a good idea to make a color wheel of bowling pins or mermaids? What possible function could this serve? Couldn't we do something better in terms of thinking about color? So here's a few chromophiliac curriculum, post-color wheel. Colored objects. Bring in 30 to 50 objects that you can carry, that are not precious, and that are not biodegradable. So here's the students having brought these in, rolling out a large piece of black paper on the floor, and then basically saying to students, organize these colors. And that's the only direction that's given. So students have to sort of intuit ideas about hue, value, chroma, and they start working together. And it's interesting, the conversations that they have. I'm interested in the way in which they would relate to each other about different things. At one point, a student brought an orange thing down to this end of the strip, and a student said, "Get that brown thing out of my orange section." And then someone else said, but brown is like dark orange. And the person was like, "Oh, right, my bad." So it's kind of interesting to see students figure out these color classifications on their own. And once you have all these objects, because people have brought in 50, sort of put them together, and then you can do assignments where students are making compositions, they're making designs, color choices, and making pieces. Color in public space. Make a color statement in public space without doing something dangerous or unethical. So here's some different projects that people did thinking about this. So we did these in class, and then people wandered around. And of course, one of the interesting things that starts to happen as we go visit these is how the students themselves start to interact and become part of the color palette we're looking at. These students, I'm not going to show you the video, but they dressed up in red on the Blue Line in Chicago. It's the name of one of our train lines. And basically, they went around and would gather. So all of a sudden, they became a tableau of a color of red. And then they would invite other people who had red to join them. In Chicago, it can be pretty not bright, pretty bleak in the wintertime. So one of the projects that we looked at was the idea of what it would mean to put little color interventions into the environment. And one of the things that happened that was interesting, this is like colored wax creeping out of things, is that you start to notice things that are there, like the markings on the sidewalk for the gas or for when they're going to do some street construction, and start to see those not as sort of ugly things, but as beautiful color interventions into the landscape. Or here was kind of a different approach. This is like a kind of a space between a university building and a private apartment complex. And the student chose to make this piece, which is actually quite heavy. It's solid concrete. And he chose to make it in a color that would blend into the environment. And so it's just there. And so a few years later, that piece is still there, kind of an enigmatic piece that somehow or another works. Here, students doing yarn bombing, adding to playgrounds. Or this one I think is really quite lovely, where small empty spaces become the place in which colored pencils are added. And this was a very ambitious piece. The student made hundreds and hundreds of little ice cubes, and the colored ice cubes, and then put them out in the environment. One thing that was sort of nice is now you can buy for so inexpensively little like bike lights, that she also would light some of these sculptures and just leave them, in the public space lit. It's very cold day, so just a little bit of water allows you to place, they immediately freeze to the wall, and you have these kind of beautiful little installations. Or here, another piece, it was done on a windowsill of a building. So here you're in the building looking down. The students also then actually wrote signs to the people in the office building across the way, asking them to take a photograph and send it to them. So that's what we're getting here. And here you can see at night the little city sculpture and kind of see it in context where you're looking down to downtown Chicago. So color chip harmonies. I got really interested in the idea of when you make a color harmony, instead of spending all this time painting, why not just have color chips that people can use, experiment, and show? And so out of that, having students go and select color chips from the hardware store, the paint store, bringing them in, and then they could experiment with things like monochromatic or analogous color schemes, or starting to do like sort of unique personal color schemes. So out of that, we also started to do things with like CHROMA experiments, noticing how there's always some color which is going to look brighter. And I started to see, I was really interested in seeing how the students talk to each other about these things. And to me, it seemed so interesting, this idea of people actually engaging in a conversation. So when talking about what does color do, how does it shift, we also started to realize that maybe what we needed to do was to make color animations. And these are just made, you know, with a phone, without a copy stand or anything, just very quickly. But especially when you slow them down, you can kind of see this idea of how, depending on what other colors are present, colors have different effects. So that led to project that I did in Michigan, in Lansing, Michigan, with the Broad Museum Art Lab. So it was communicating color, performing perception. So we are in this space, which is like an open space to the street. So there's people walking in, and there's also like big windows, and people would be looking in, and we were using these tables with black tablecloths. First of all, just kind of sorting colors, people making piles of color that they found interesting. And then from the individual colors, starting to work together to make pieces. And of course, these were very effective, but sometimes by the round table. But what would be interesting is people would wander in, start talking about it. Other people who were participating would go to other tables. People would come in, and we'd invite anyone who showed up to be part of making color statements. And it was fascinating to hear people talk about the way color looked, kind of reaching something in communication that normally we don't have words for, that normally we don't talk about. And seeing how something that was interesting would then draw other people who would get involved, and it became a focus for people to work on things. So I want to thank the University of Illinois at Chicago and the School of the Art Institute of Chicago students for sharing their color sensibilities. I also want to encourage you to take the 2021 Color Wheel Pledge. Actually, we have this pledge every year, but the pledge for you as teachers is, I can teach color without making students paint in little boxes. So thank you very much. There's a version of this, if you Google Olivia Goody, NAEA Chromatopia, there's with an expanded version of this presentation. So thank you very much. John, something's happening. Oh, there it goes. I get it. Sorry, it took me a moment to get out of there. So now we've each presented, and so we can ask some questions. So I think if you want to take a minute and type any more questions into the chat, and I'll just sort of start with a question that people asked of Ava, and I think it also applies to Anne's work, which is, but with Ava, did these student teachers translate their experiences to lessons for primary or secondary education?
Yeah, there is for secondary education actually, but they were not planning in this part actually, lessons. But yeah, that's something I should do actually, to see how it's coming out on the other side, I think actually. But I haven't done that. Yeah.
And you know, we seem to be such a good group. If somebody wants to just unmute and ask a question, I think that would be okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Olivia.
Yes.
Hi. I was just wondering, how much time did the students have to do the color interventions assignment?
I mean, this was a college class, so the students, you know, we gave it to them 1 week, and then I think it was due 2 weeks later. But in the meantime, we were doing different work in class. We met 2 days a week as a studio class, and they were doing other projects in class while that was kind of ideating.
Okay, so color was and those workshop classes, was it about color as well?
Yeah, actually, I taught a whole class on it. Was a class that was typically a color theory class, and actually the class did contain a lot of information about color theory, but I thought it was taught in an interesting way, including there's projects that connect the idea of language and color, like sort of really fascinating things about how people's ability to perceive differentiations in color has to do with what language they grew up speaking. So there was a lot of, actually, I think it was more color theory than people normally get in a color theory class, but it was done in this other kind of way. And as I say, if you Google Chromatopia, Olivia Goody, you'll find the PDFs of that kind of long presentation.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I'm seeing that there's questions in the chat about the advisability of students burning things. So it'd be interesting to find out how are you thinking about that in terms of the advisability or the possibility of this sort of incredibly visually exciting project, but potentially dangerous.
I already answered in the chat. The students are grown-ups. They are like 20, 25, 30 years old. So I think they're responsible enough to create a situation in which they don't burn their own hands or whole buildings.
Right, right. You know, it also occurs to me, as long as the things that are getting burned are not like toxic, that, you know, traditionally, a lot of ceramics classes had students go out into like open fields and dig pits and do firing with real fire. I mean, that's kind of a tradition of teaching ceramics, and that some of those similar precautions might work for doing a burning project. It could be really excited for people.
I think what I'm thinking about now is that in art class and the buildings that I teach, it's fire is like the most anxious thing. That's the last thing you can do with students, like to burn things.
Yeah.
Also smoke machines and stuff. But you know, this is like a sort of a strange thing to ask to students, and that's why it's good to do it outside of the classes, and I mean outside of the program, outside of the curriculum. I like to poke them a little bit, maybe. So I think it's really necessary to do things like that. That's what I want to say.
Right, right. Actually, I noticed that someone mentioned that that they are colorblind, and so that you know is difficult when they're in color classes. I think one of the things that is just something worth mentioning is that many people have never been diagnosed as colorblind until they're in an art class. So that, I mean, maybe if they have a severe color blindness, that might come up. But other than that, sometimes the first time that someone realizes their color perception is different than others is in an art class. So that's something I think that's very interesting to be mindful of. Other questions?
And do the children perceive the city very different after they've awarded all these awards to the city? Do they take a different perspective on the city?
Disappeared?
I don't know. Could you hear my question, or is it?
We hear you.
Sorry about that. I forgot to unmute.
Oh, sorry, no problem.
Yeah, it's 5 days. And so the first day and 5 different interventions that by the 5th day, they have 5 things they can do. And assessing the city is one of them. So on the first day, they're a little shy of the city. And they also are just delighted that the grown-ups in charge are asking them to, giving them more space to derive than they usually do and to turn more than they usually do. And then by the 5th day, it's like a dance. They'll stop and they'll say, I want to put something in clay right here, or, oh, this is the best tree, you know? So it becomes this very rich dialogue by day 5. And the walking becomes sort of like they're revisiting this old friend. And the other thing is they can see, kind of like what Olivia was talking about with the ice sculptures, they could, or the big block, the cement block, they'll see pieces that their friends have put in, and some of them are gone, some of them are there. Other people have done things with them so that it becomes a bigger dialogue. So yeah.
It's great. Yes.
Other questions? We've got time for maybe one or two.
Olivia, could I ask you a question?
Sure, Volker. Nice to see you.
I was wondering, do you make connections with professional art? I mean, not color problems you associate with modern art, but are there interesting contemporary artists that you know of who are working with color and are interesting for students?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people, and of course, because you asked me in front of 70 people from many continents, I can't think of one right this moment, you know. But there's a number of people. Actually, one person that I really like is a Korean artist who's done a lot of photography work. Like Paul with his blue things, Molly with her pink things, and she does like dozens of these photographs, and that becomes a very interesting conversation about gender binary and like how those things are not necessarily something we have to dissolve, but it's something we have to notice is created to begin with. So we've had some very rich conversations. Also, a lot of work with black and white, looking at the symbolism of black and white and how that, you know, affects various kinds of racial discourses. So yeah, there's a number of people who also work in color, which is like more of a formal intervention, and all those things I think are really exciting. It gets color out of this sort of box, but becomes color as something which is a vital thing that happens in the world. Do you have a artist you'd like to suggest to us that we take a look at?
No, not particular. I really was interested in your suggestions. I don't have one myself. No.
Okay, great. Yeah, there's some of them in the Chromatopia thing that I recommended to people, and yeah. Good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I actually see that we are at 10:12, which means that it's only a few minutes to the next one. So I think in the interest of being kind to our bodies, we could close this session and give people a chance to stretch, have a beverage, and then attend a workshop. So look forward to seeing you at a workshop or also this afternoon at the new panel. So thank you so much to the participants, and thank you to all the attendees.